The Revelations radios put us in this weird understanding of the zombie storyline, where they would present us with information that seemed to make sense and also gave us information that we had been asking for years, clarity or endings to maps, and we saw this with the radio from McNamara that was from the map 5. In this radio, you had John McNamara in the closet hiding from a horde of zombies. He described himself as the lone survivor, saying the rest of his team had died. And then he said he thinks he will soon share a similar fate. And we looked at that radio and said, okay, this is how 5 ends. The characters all end up dying in the map, and that gave us an answer to a question we had had for a long time. Whatever happened to them after the outbreak? Well, then the timeline comes along, and this changes our understanding of a number of these radios. Some of them, like the McNamara radio, had them placed in a fracture, which is a reality that's different from the original and actual version that we played in-game. So we learned from the timeline that in the in-game version, all the characters actually survive, and history goes on as normal. Except in the fractured universe, which happens when our characters start meddling with time, that they all end up dying. So that's what kind of goes on there, and our understanding of all these different radios from Revelations has kind of been wrong for one reason or another because of the timeline. The radios put us in this situation where maybe they didn't deceive us, they definitely weren't lying to us or tricking us, but they weren't giving us the full picture, and they were withholding important information from us. There was no way to know that radio was from a fracture unless you had something like the timeline to tell you that, and that's where some of these radios become frustrating. So we have some radios from Revelations inside the Shangri-La section of the map that kind of describe what was going on with Call of the Dead. Take a listen.
It's been 6 weeks since the rest of the Call of the Dead cast and crew went missing. Hollywood's lost its fucking mind on this story. An entire production vanishes? Crazy talk. I told you, this is why you don't shoot in Siberia. So with Agent on line 1, Manager on line 2, I needed to sort this quickly. I'd rather zombies come for me than an agent. That's real horror. I don't need that. I started going through his research, and good fucking lord, this is a confusing mess. So much shit about time travel, different dimensions. Honestly, I'm not even sure what he's getting into. You can make this stuff up. A mad German scientist, a foul-mouthed American, a drunk Soviet, and a warrior Japanese soldier, all working together? So I started with a simple one. Something about 2 guys named Brock and Gary looking for a Garfield. They finished like dead. Pretty would start there. Next thing I know, I'm in this jungle, and it's hot and humid, and the sky goes black. Like dark black. I look up. There's an eclipse, and these things start chasing me. Like zombies. Trust me, I know how it sounds. I've been fighting them so long now. I should be dead. In fact, I'm pretty sure I have died, but it just keeps going.
When I had made a video about these radios probably 10 months ago, I had described the woman in the radio as Sarah Michelle Gellar. This is a mistake that a lot of us in the community got wrong. Because we had looked at this situation and went, okay, we have a woman from Call of the Dead. Who are all the women that we know from Call of the Dead? Because this woman hadn't really said who she was. And we go, well, Sarah Michelle Gellar. She was really the only woman in that map, and all of the other radios kind of present this lone survivor scenario. You can look at the Revelations radios that described Verrückt, and you had Johnny Banana, who was the lone survivor. You could look at the radio that described 5, and you had a lone survivor in John McNamara. And so here we have a radio from Call of the Dead, which describes one of the lone survivors. Well, it would probably then be Sally, because there's usually one lone survivor from every group. And unfortunately, we learned from the timeline that we were wrong about this, and this is actually not what happened. This is a new character. If we were to read the timeline, we see April 11th, 2011. Following the disappearance of the Call of the Dead cast and crew, Romero's assistant Sally begins her search for her boss. His journey leads her to Shangri-La during an eclipse, which sends her back in time to April 25th, 1965. So this bit of the timeline gives us a brand new character. Sally was not a character we had met until those Revelations radios, and we had no idea who this character's name was until we had gotten this snippet of the timeline. So this kind of clears things up. This gives us a brand new character and gives us a different frame for that Call of the Dead radio. And you can see this Call of the Dead radio is not like the others, where in this case, the lone survivor was not actually somebody who was there at the map. It was a publicist for George Romero. And let's also discuss, since we have this new character, whether or not we'll be seeing this new character again. I don't think that's actually the case. This character just, to me, seems more like a throwaway than somebody that will actually be developed or brought into the fold, especially because the storyline is moving forward into greater places. It doesn't make sense for them to go back and wrap up the arc of Sally, who right now just appears to be trapped in Shangri-La, especially when you listen to some of her radios from Shangri-La. She's talking about being trapped in the cycle. She's in the same exact cycle that Brock and Gary were trapped in, that we eventually freed them from, and potentially we may have also ended Sally's cycle by completing the Shangri-La Easter egg, because if you look at the date, she is there at the same exact time as Shangri-La. This is also in the original universe. That's one of the nice things that the timeline tells us. So while the 5 radio was from a fractured universe, this radio is not from a fractured universe. This radio is actually from the original universe. Sally is in Shangri-La when we play Shangri-La in either Zombie Chronicles or the original Black Ops 1. She's a character who was present, but we had no idea was ever there. So that's actually what's going on with her. She was there the whole time, I guess, or that's what they want you to think. This radio still begs the question of how Sally actually ended up getting to Shangri-La, and I think the only logical explanation you can make is that because our characters had teleported to Shangri-La on the date of April 23rd, 1956, then maybe because there was like a rift between those two times and places, that the rift was still open and Sally ended up going through that rift as well and ending up at that exact time period, which would explain why she's there at the same exact time as Shangri-La. That right now seems to be the only explanation, where had the cast and crew, or not the cast and crew, but had our original Ultimus crew teleported somewhere else, well then Sally probably would have teleported to that place as well. And why would Treyarch bring something like this into the story? There's no real good explanation other than the fact that it gives a conclusion to the Call of the Dead story, where we kind of see the reaction of the outside world to Call of the Dead as well as what happened to the crew, because we didn't know what happened to the crew. They might have been rescued or they might have died, and this confirms that they all died, and Sarah Michelle Gellar, unlike what many of us in the community, myself included, suspected, was wrong. She did not survive. She did not go to Shangri-La. She died at Call of the Dead with the rest of the crew, or went missing, I guess you could say, as Sally described. The only reason I could see them including something like this is to give closure to a map like that. However, it still does beg the question of why you needed to send Sally to Shangri-La. That's the weird part, because it's not like Sally ended up appearing in the map or had any sort of effect on the world around her, or there was even like a reference to her. She wasn't really ever present. This was kind of a revisionist history sort of thing. I don't know why Jason would want to do this other than for fun, but who knows. That's going to wrap things up for this video. I wanted to make this correction video. I've been meaning to do it for a very long time, and I figured I'd do it now. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'm going to go. Have a wonderful day, and bye.